All right, so this morning, decided this is about 7 o'clock in the morning here. We'll do a little bit of a discussion of how the electricity markets work here in the Northeast United States. So we have the ability through the websites of the electricity grid operators to see a lot of detailed data about how the grid is actually functioning and what fuels are being used and what the loads are and where electricity is going to and from, as well as the prices that are on the market at the moment. So I look at this periodically, and this is basically PJM, which originally that stood for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. Those were the three states where this power grid began, probably way back in like the mid 20th century. And it's slowly expanded over the years, and now it basically encompasses looks like we got Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, parts of North Carolina, parts of Tennessee, parts of Kentucky, all of Ohio, parts of Michigan, parts of Illinois, West Virginia, Washington, D.C. Those are all the territories that are being covered by this power grid. And this is actually the largest power grid in the United States in terms of load served. So I think there's like 100 and some million people that are actually getting their power from this grid, basically that live in this region right here. So if I can get this to look good for the video. So basically PJM publishes all of this information so that you can go look at it. So I look at this periodically, and something I've really been noticing in the past couple of weeks has been greatly elevated spot market power prices. So they have what they call the locational marginal price, or the LMP. And that LMP is effectively the cost per megawatt hour of the most expensive generator on the system. And this number has been creeping upwards in the past few weeks. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Probably reasons that I don't know because I don't work in this business. But from what I do know is that worldwide there is a fossil fuel, they're calling it a crisis. I don't know if that's the correct term. That sounds a little alarmist. But there's issues with coal prices and natural gas prices and oil prices all around the world. Apparently in China they don't have enough coal available to run all of their power plants. They have political issues with Australia. They won't sell them, buy coal from Australia. Then there's India has coal shortages. Coal is in a crunch right now. So it's kind of funny because when President Trump was in office, we thought that the bottom was going to fall out of the coal industry, and now we've got the prices are crazy high. So we can tell by looking at this pie chart, and there's a little bit of a delay on this, but basically this is the PJM's generation fuel mix. So in addition to coal, there's also a problem with natural gas, particularly in Europe. They're having very high natural gas prices that's causing everybody to go nuts in the energy business. All of these issues are caused by the logistical problem of getting enough fossil fuel from where it comes from the mine, from the well, from the wherever it's sourced from, to the actual generating plants that are producing the electricity for these local or regional power grids. Here in the U.S., our natural gas prices have significantly increased. So we have Henry Hub gas prices. If I can get a chart from this. Okay, that goes all the way back to 98. So last year in 2020, at this time, we were about $2.30 per million BTU for natural gas. And now we are at $5.16. So it's almost tripled in terms of natural gas prices. And that gas price really, really plays into cost of electricity on the wholesale level, because right now in PJM, they're getting like a third of the actual generation is coming from natural gas. So the big blue pie that you see here is 28,000 megawatts from natural gas. The yellow is also as nuclear, which we're getting 28,000 megawatts. And the interesting thing about the nuclear value is normally the nuclear plants in PJM, when you add them all together and they're all operating, they come out to about 33,000 megawatts. So we've got nuclear power plants that are offline right now for maintenance or refueling or whatever it may be. So there's a deficit of almost 5,000 megawatts. So that has to be made up somewhere else. We're probably using gas to do that. The purple is coal. And what's interesting is the slice of the pie that's for coal is actually much smaller than it normally is. So we're only getting about 9,700 megawatts from coal right now. And I don't know what coal prices are at the moment, but I know that coal is now an international commodity and it's traded worldwide. So if our coal industry here in the U.S. can get better rates by selling their coal to China or India, that's going to drive up the price for local markets. So unless these power plants have long-term contracts with coal suppliers, they're going to have to pay more for fuel. And coal was already uneconomic in PJM, and that's the reason that this. So if you were to go back to say 2008, coal would make up over half of the power generation in PJM. And now we're down to like 15% or something tiny like that. So this chart is from 5 a.m. Like I said, there's a delay on here. But wind was generating 5,700 megawatts. So we're almost at 10% renewable, even without solar being online during the night. So other interesting facts about the generation mix is that some weird noises out there. We have this category here called other renewables. That's the burgundy red, and it's only at 496 megawatts. Normally that number is up in the 600s. And what I would classify other renewables as is things like biomass, landfill gas, waste incineration, those kind of miscellaneous energy sources that don't contribute a whole lot to the grid. But the one thing about this category is I'm guessing they're down for maintenance because it's typically that time of year. But this number tends to not fluctuate very much. So those power plants, like those waste to energy incineration state power stations, they run 24/7, basically at the same rate pretty much all the time. So you have a very steady output from those, even though it's not a large quantity in the grand scheme of things. Yellow is oil. Somebody somewhere in this region is burning oil to generate 215 megawatts of electricity. And I have a feeling that might be one of the more expensive generators on the system. So the locational marginal price. So this chart right here, the yellow regions, so the PJM is split up into basically all these zones. And these zones correspond to the electric utilities in that area. So like PPL, where I am at, we have, let me refresh this. Numbers look a little off. Okay, so right now, where I'm at, we're in the green, which is $40 to $70 per megawatt hour. All right? It looks like we're $68 per megawatt hour. here in where I'm at. So that means that if you're a wholesale electricity purchaser and you're purchasing on the spot market, which is from here, right now in this 5-minute interval, you're going to pay $68 per megawatt hour, which is 1,000 kilowatt hours. So that corresponds to 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour wholesale. But if you're over here in the yellow category, you're now at 70 to 100, which is kind of very pricey. It's a lot more expensive than it has been in the past, year or a couple of years even, because of the natural gas and the coal prices. So, interestingly enough, right now, the Jersey and Delaware and Eastern Pennsylvania is the least expensive market. And then the people out here where you have all the coal-fired plants, they're paying more right at this moment. So the generators that are operating in that region are currently have a marginal cost that's higher than the ones in the green. And this map will change all throughout the day. So depending on supply and demand, they have some kind of an algorithm, some kind of a formula that calculates based upon who should be dispatched, who should be generating, and the most expensive generator in the region then becomes the LMP for that region. And it makes a good deal for the cheap generators because their cost of input costs are lower, but yet they're getting more per megawatt hour to sell to the grid. So another interesting piece of data that they have is the state net export-import map. So the blue states here are the PJM members. And one thing that you can see with this is if it's red, that means that state is bringing electricity into it from the surrounding areas. So like right now, West Virginia is importing 160 megawatts of electricity. Okay, that's really interesting because West Virginia traditionally has been a big powerhouse and they've been a major exporter to surrounding states, but not today. Not right now, at least. Pennsylvania is exporting almost 9,000 megawatts to surrounding states. So New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, for West Virginia and Virginia and Ohio, and all of them are importing, and they're probably getting the majority of it from Pennsylvania, which has been the big powerhouse of the Northeast. So the biggest electricity exporter is Pennsylvania. And then you have Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, which are also exporting at the moment into other regions, probably over into Ohio. So Illinois is really cranking. They might have a lot of excess wind there right now. 5,000 megawatts. So, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. does not have any significant electric generation, at least not utility scale electric generation inside of its borders. So we can basically look at this chart for Washington, D.C., and that's their effective load. So it looks like Washington, D.C. is usually about a gigawatt of load. 1,300, 1,400 megawatts. At nighttime, during the day, they're dropping down to like 900 megawatts. So that's the load for Washington, D.C. Let's go back 6 months. So during the summertime, high air conditioning time, they can actually get into almost 1,800 megawatts. There's July 13th at 4 p.m. That's peak air conditioning season right there. You can see all that. You can see Pennsylvania, how much we export for the past 6 months. So actually in July, peak air conditioning, we're sending almost 1,400 megawatts to surrounding states. There's never been a time in the past 6 months when this chart has gone below zero. So we've always been an exporter. Look at North Carolina. So PJM doesn't have a lot of territory in North Carolina. But look at this. This here is very, very illustrative because peak, dip, peak, dip, peak, dip, peak. And what does North Carolina have a lot of? And that's solar power. So the top of that peak is at 1 p.m., 1 o'clock, and they're exporting 2,000 megawatts. Come 8 p.m., they're only exporting 506 megawatts. So basically what that tells me is that they've got 1,500 megawatts of solar that's being sent to other states. All right? Because these dips are at night, 3 a.m., 2 p.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m. So this pattern here is fully a result of solar power. Okay? And you can basically see that every day when the sun comes up, what happens. West Virginia. You see that West Virginia's exports have been basically gone to zero at, they went below zero here on October 16th. So it could just be that the coal price issue has reached their plants and they decided to cut back. All right. This time of year tends to be low demand. So 8,300 megawatts on the system, and that's about what the peak's going to be for the day. So they do load forecasts where they basically estimate what do we think it's going to be, and then there's of course the generation, the actual production, and usually it matches up pretty good. These people are pretty good at this. They've been doing it for 75, 100 years. So here's more. These numbers have of course changed. So now down here in Delmarva and Philadelphia, they're down at the $20 per megawatt hour range. So electricity is getting cheaper. The sun's coming up. You know, the sun's coming up. You got your solar power starting to take over. It's beautifully clear out today, 100% clear. Philadelphia region has a lot of solar power. See, they do forecast wind and solar. So what you're going to get for the day, they'll be able to show you what that is. There's what wind's been doing. Right now, at this moment, we're making 3,800 megawatts of wind. Okay. They provide you a lot more data than this, but you have to go into a data miner tool and look at it like through Excel sheets and stuff. So most of that stuff is very technical, and I don't even look at this. That's basically it. How the power grid determines the price of electricity based upon supply and demand at this moment. Out of all the economic commodities that there are in existence, electricity is probably the most subject to the theoretical concepts of supply and demand because you don't have the ability to store it, at least not yet, in large quantities. And you have to make it as soon as you need it. And that means that you don't have these people that can fudge around with supply and demand by storing it. Like I said, at least not yet. We will be there soon, but we're not right now. The only places to have significant storage of electricity is through pumped hydro, where you're pumping water up into a reservoir and then you're letting it come back down, or battery systems, which there are battery systems out there, but they're just not significant, at least not in PJM, part of the picture yet. It's energy storage. Most of the oil markets, we can store oil in tanks and wherever, and people can basically make money off the difference between supply and demand. Whereas with electricity, you have to, you as soon as you need it, you need to make it. You aren't storing it. So this market is probably one of the few things that where the supply and demand concept really makes a lot of sense versus physical stuff you can hold in your hand. All right, that's basically it. Mostly nuclear and natural gas, and then coal and wind are making up the difference at this early morning hour in PJM.